Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, hi, hello, welcome. I am Sherrilyn and I am so glad you found me. I missed you guys so much. If I feel like I'm out of it, I am. I have never experienced jet lag like I am right now. So, one moment. So if you struggle to follow on a good Sherrilyn day, baby, I apologize, okay? I apologize in advance. You won't be able to. I don't know what it is. I think it was the 18-hour travel day back home and then just like right into work. And so I don't even think I've really like processed. Like I woke up this morning and I'm still like in I'm still in the mentality of being like, where am I? And it's like, your bed, Sherrilyn. Get up. You have things to do and get with it. Anyways, hi. With all that being said, let's get into it because we have so much to talk about today. Did I tell you guys here or did we only talk about it on the podcast? Chelsea and I went to London to go to Robert and James Welsh's show. We were so lucky to be able to go on stage with them as well and then collab with them later. And I didn't want to leave them. Like when they were leaving, I was like, okay, I miss you already. We love you. Bye. The husbands got to meet them too and were like totally fangirling. They loved them so much. They're just amazing. So yeah, and then Big Guy and I went to Dublin for a few days after that. But that kind of stuff is all over on the Here for the Cloud podcast and our Patreon. And I think Robert and James's Patreon as well. So anyways, lots of fun. That's what I was doing. Okay, now back to it. Before we get started though, I have a quick riddle for you. The more you tell me, the less they trust you. What am I? While you think about that, I have one more quick message for you. I want to give a huge thank you to our sponsor today, Thrive Market. Let's talk about grocery shopping for a second, okay? If you're anything like me, you know how overwhelming it can be, not only just to shop, but to find healthy and sustainable options, especially when you are trying to stick to a budget. That is where Thrive Market comes in. They make it super easy to find premium, organic, and non-GMO groceries without having to duck and weave from, people you haven't talked to in 20 years for a reason. Why are they always at the grocery store? Everything is delivered to your door so you can save time, stress, and awkwardness. Thrive Market has some of the highest quality standards in the industry, so when you shop with them, you know you're getting products that are 100% non-GMO, plus they restrict over 1,000 ingredients, ensuring that everything is top-notch. They also have a handy in-app barcode scanner, which makes it super easy to swap out your regular grocery items for healthier, certified organic, and non-toxic alternatives. What's even better is Thrive Market is designed to be affordable, so you're getting all of these high quality organic groceries for a fraction of the price that you would pay at regular stores. They offer low sugar and high protein options, and they have over 90 different diets and values that you can shop from. Whether you follow vegan, gluten-free, or other specific diets, Thrive Market has you covered. If you want to check them out, they have a special deal for my Sippin Dales. Use my link and you'll get 30% off your first order and a free gift by going to thrivemarket.com/SherrilynDale. That's 30% on groceries right now is insane, so don't miss out. Once again, you can find them at thrivemarket.com/SherrilynDale to grab your 30% off and choose your free gift today. Thank you again so much, Thrive Market, for sponsoring today's video. Okay, let's get started. I'm so excited. This is one of those episodes where I'm like, I have been needing to talk about this because my friends and family are so sick of me asking them like, hey, have you watched the documentary Anatomy of Lies yet? And then when they say no, like I get really upset. So now I'm coming to my internet friends and family to talk about this because I need to. And you guys know me, like if I like have a hyperfixation, I need everybody to know about it. I bring it here. I don't even know why I ask everybody in my real life anymore because you guys are the only ones who really care, and that means a lot. But anyways, yeah, I have not stopped thinking about this documentary. And when I watched it, I was just like, how was this not on my radar before? Just like the amount of lies and twists and turns and deceit, absolutely insane. So it dives into the absolutely insane story of Elisabeth Finch, who was a writer on Grey's Anatomy, who she didn't just write dramatic plot lines for the show. No. She lived them and then used them as inspiration for the storylines, or at least that's what she told everybody, okay? So she built this career by essentially like allowing her incredibly personal and touching like stories of trauma and abuse, and also like resilience and devastating cancer diagnosis. Is like her life, according to her. It was just basically like a never-ending episode of Grey's that she was sharing with the world, okay? So she was living for years with a rare terminal cancer while writing for shows like Vampire Diaries and Grey's Anatomy. She was a survivor of abuse from her brother. When he was confronted by her, he apparently took his life, but was unsuccessful on purpose to make her pull the plug. She also claimed that one of her really close friends was killed in the Tree of Life synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh, and that she was the one who helped clean up her friend's remains, allegedly with FBI permission. So the things that she's lived through obviously are an inspiration not only to her coworkers, but everybody else. And everyone saw her as this warrior, there we go, Sherrilyn, who challenged her, unimaginable pain into this really powerful, touching storytelling. Eventually, though, the big question was asked. Were these stories even hers? Elisabeth Finch was born in March 1978. She grew up in a middle-class Jewish family in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, raised by her parents, her mother Joan, a special education teacher, and her father Robert. She was raised alongside her one sibling, her older brother Eric. Her home life, by all accounts, was stable and loving. Friends and relatives recalled that nothing really seemed particularly unusual or traumatic about her early years. She was bat mitzvahed, went to Jewish summer camp, attended Cherry Hill East High School, where she wrote plays in the theater department. And I guess her plays were really well received, even like at this young age. Friends recalled that she had a very vivid imagination and loved entertaining others with her stories. Obviously, this knack for creativity became a defining part of Elisabeth's identity from a young age. And by the time she was a teenager, she was really honing in on those skills, and it would obviously later serve her as a writer in Hollywood writing rooms. After high school, Elisabeth pursued her love of writing in higher education. She earned a degree in creative writing from Carnegie, I think I got that, Mellon University, and then went on to attend film school at the University of Southern California. So while friends and family were reflecting and didn't think that there was anything like in those earlier years of her life that could have been, super traumatic and something that would have taken a lot to overcome, there was a situation in college that obviously affected her life, and it was when her mom Joan was diagnosed with cancer. This was something Elisabeth wrote about 5 years into her mom's battle. So she kind of took that experience and the feelings and emotions that she was going through, like watching her mom go through cancer and treatment and all that, and poured it into her writing. So in one excerpt from something that she wrote, she said, "Our family were all experts in pharmacology, wig design, hip hospital lingo, and fashioning surreptitious means of throwing up in public places." The positive, spin outlook on the story with Elisabeth's mother is she survived her cancer, and Elisabeth went on to land a job as an assistant to television writer Rick Cleveland. I didn't know who that was, and then I was like, oh, when I looked into his resume, little accolades. He was best known for writing shows like 6 Feet Under and The West Wing, and also The House of Cards. And while she was working for him, his mother ended up getting sick with stage 4 lung cancer. And I guess he said that Elisabeth was very helpful doing research for him, and he described her as a real mensch, which in Yiddish, mensch roughly means like a good person, a person of integrity and honor. So he had obviously a lot of respect for Elisabeth. And he ultimately introduced her to Alan Ball, who is the creator of True Blood, and in 2008 she got her first job as a junior TV writer. She was later promoted to a full-time writer position and then wrote for the 2010 dramedy No Ordinary Family before ultimately moving to The Vampire Diaries in 2012. Loved Vampire Diaries. You guys gotta let me know, were you team Stefan or team Damon? I was team Damon for so long. Or Stefan, sorry. And then I don't know. I don't really know the answer. I love them both. I did think that like the passion with Stefan or with Damon felt like more there with Elena. Anyways, I gotta rewatch that, I think. Anyways, this is where she earned the nickname Vampire Girl. It was 2 years into her role of writing for Vampire Diaries, VD if you will, that she wrote an article for Elle magazine that would essentially kind of change the course of her life. In this piece, she revealed that she had been diagnosed with chondrosarcoma, which is a rare, aggressive, and often fatal bone cancer. She claimed it was discovered after she went for a knee replacement surgery and that the tumor had gotten so large that doctors couldn't remove it without risking paralysis. So she said that she was ultimately put on chemo and just kind of like living with it. She was just kind of like, this is what it is. Like, I have cancer and this is where we're at. And no one really knew, there was no plan, I guess. I think the plan was always like, it was terminal. Again, though, the way it was written was not like, like, here it is, this is the end, this is what I'm going through. It was very much framed as proof that this woman was a complete warrior. She wrote about pushing through treatments while she's still working full-time, writing for Vampire Diaries. In that piece, she said she watched the producer's cuts under a fog of Demerol, punched up dialogue about vampire werewolf hybrids with a shunt in my spine. Yes, I was down 17 pounds, bald, vomiting relentlessly, but I was still living alone, still stubborn as hell. So it was that line that got, even more higher ups attention in Hollywood. Shortly after that article dropped, someone at Shondaland, which is the production company behind so many amazing shows, but Grey's Anatomy, saw Elisabeth and was like, this girl is a rising star. So at the time, the show was in its 10th season, I believe, and she was quickly introduced to none other than Shonda Rhimes. And by the end of that meeting, Elisabeth walked away with her dream job, a spot in the Grey's Anatomy writer's room. Now, there were whispers early on that some folks, they weren't loving her script. Her pages weren't really making it past the table reads. But that being said, no one wanted to rock the boat, right? Like, she was hired, met with Shonda. Like, this was like a really big deal. And it kind of like kept going back to that reflection of this piece that she wrote for Elle. And then, when it's not hitting when she gets the job, people are like, well, like, she's already hired. Like, we cannot fire the woman with cancer. So whenever that was kind of like brought up, it was immediately shut down. And it was like, she's staying, she's here. And to be fair, even if the writing wasn't hitting, it sounded like, based on her other, colleagues, that everyone admired her. They really grew to love her, found her inspirational. She was at work. A lot of times she would be in the middle of meetings, running out to go and throw up in the bathroom and then like come back. Sometimes you would be able to see like a chemo port through her shirt. And she just, kept telling everybody like she's okay. And she's actually the only survivor. Like, it's looking like she's in survival mode with the clinical trial that her and her doctors had like chosen to take. So she's like this miracle patient, this miracle aura to be around. And you're in you're writing for a television show where, like, health and like in the hospital and rare and miraculous, diseases and whatever are happening all around you. So this is like, she's inspiring. Okay. So everybody loved Finchy. That's what they called her, Finchy. So if I kind of go back and forth with Elisabeth or Finchy, because that's what I heard so much, Finch's Elisabeth, okay? Elisabeth eventually would go on to write 13 episodes for Grey's Anatomy and produced 172. And it was in 2016 that she first brought her form of cancer, chondrosarcoma, into the Grey's Anatomy universe. I guess the very first time it wasn't like a main character, she had wrote a scene where it was a teenager girl and she's described as this like sassy, confident, little spunky teen girl. She had a prosthetic and she tells the doctors like, turns out I'm one in a bajillion of kids to get chondrosarcoma. We have our work cut out for us, gentlemen. So that was the first time. And then in 2018, fans of the show will remember this one. The Catherine Avery cancer storyline came into play. Now, according to Elisabeth, she said she wasn't really on board with sharing something so personal, which is kind of interesting because it's like, well, you had shared that with your writing piece and that was like the one that like got you the job. So weird looking back on that now. So initially though, she said no, she didn't want it to be a part of the show. But then, with the team's love and encouragement, it wore her down. She even said like, I wanted to say no. A big, fat, super emphatic, though ever polite, no. I said yes because Shonda once wrote an email where she told me, love yourself more. And when Shonda says something like that, you listen. Now, I have a really big confession for you guys. I've never watched Grey's Anatomy. I cannot do medical shows. I am a full-blown hypochondriac. Like I lose sleep. If I watch that one, I don't think I would ever sleep again because isn't there like 1,000 seasons of it? I don't know. I know there's a lot because my oldest daughter watches it. Like she's obsessed. It's like one of her comfort shows. So I know of it, obviously. And then I know a few of you Sippin Dales out there are longtime fans of Grey's Anatomy as well. Emmy, Kate, I'm looking at you, girl. So if you're a fan, you will probably remember when Catherine Avery gets diagnosed with chondrosarcoma. And that was basically heavily based on Elisabeth's life and experience with it. I think she was even a nurse in one of the scenes, like wheeling Catherine into surgery or like prepping her after. I remember seeing something like that in the documentary. You guys have to watch the documentary. Obviously, I wasn't in the writing room, okay? Never wrote for Grey's Anatomy. Shocking as I can't form a sentence most days. But when I was watching, like her coworkers retell their experience of all of this, it sounded like very interesting because yes, on one hand, you've got somebody that you like love and inspire and are inspired by. And then, when it came to this storyline, at first she's saying she didn't really want to write and use her story for this. And then all of a sudden, Shonda inspired her to. And I think this was like a turning point for a lot of her coworkers because from there, anytime a cancer storyline was brought up, Elisabeth was like the authority, and not like everybody else was like, oh, okay, Elisabeth's authority on it. It was like her. She kind of like made it seem like her experience, like the experience that she was living through currently, made it off limits for like other writers to really like contribute or weigh in, even though there were 2 other cancer survivors on staff. They ended up just like stop weighing in because she would basically be like, yeah, okay, like you survived. Like, so that's everything. You don't know what it's like. I'm still fighting. And so if anybody would disagree with something that she had to say and not want to include it, I guess she would like kind of like snap on them and yeah, just fire back with like, you don't understand, and like storm out of the room. So like pretty much anytime there was like cancer, people just stopped talking. It just got like really tense. It also came out that when it came to writing that storyline in, even though she said there was a lot of pushback, allegedly the conversation went more like this. It was like Finch saying it would be amazing to give Catherine my cancer, but maybe we shouldn't. It would be too triggering. And then other writers saying, completely understandable, like, let's protect you. If you want that, like, somebody else can do it. And she was like, no, I'll do it. That's how it sounded like it went. Now, like I said, the drama surrounding this woman's life, this was not just like limited to like her cancer and the writer's room. This woman was everywhere she went. She was surrounded by it. There was a sudden medical episode. I believe she was like overheating and collapsed during a family member's college graduation. Against all medical odds, due to her cancer treatment, she became pregnant and then was faced with the awful decision of having to abort her fetus, because if she didn't and wanted to continue to carry it, like, she'd have to quit treatment. So she had to make this, unimaginable decision. She would write a lot about this, or like tweet a lot about these things to insert herself in a lot of conversations. Another thing that she tweeted about was a trip to Jerusalem, where she said she was swarmed by cyclists in the middle of this race, and she had a health scare during that made like everybody again like rush to her, kind of like the family members' college graduation. That's what I'm trying to say. Even that trip home she tweeted about, that wasn't drama free either. She said that she was forced to check her luggage. They forced her at the airport to check her luggage that had her cancer medication inside, and then went to Twitter to just rage at Delta. She said, "You cannot insist a cancer patient check meds, lose the bag, and insist nothing can be done." What's really interesting here, like looking back on all of it, is she always presents herself as somebody who wanted to be like, or like says she always wanted to be behind the scenes and like didn't want the recognition or attention of everything that she's overcome, yet she never misses an opportunity to remind everybody like just like how much of a warrior she is, like fighting through everything against all odds, and even just like any like inserting herself in anything, not even like cancer related. Do you know what I mean? Like any cause, like it's like, oh yeah, I've also dealt with that. In fact, for somebody who's like, I don't want to talk about, I don't need to be recognized, or I don't need anybody to like feel sorry for me or even like know what I've been through. She went on to write like 8 cancer themed articles, like huge ones, including like, "I confronted the doctor who missed my cancer." And a lot of the times too, she's always like the smarty pants, right? And everybody else around her, like any person of authority, is just completely brain dead. There was also the deciding to have an abortion, ... while getting chemo. And then likewise, she never missed an opportunity to insert herself like online. She would write tweets like, "Talk to me when you've screamed yourself to sleep at night from the pain, and I'll argue about the merits of legalizing marijuana every damn where. I've officially run out of ways to politely say this. Stop tweeting me miracle cancer cures. It's exhausting and insulting and presumptuous AF." And now listen, you're probably like, Sherrilyn, for somebody going like through like all like cancer and stuff like that, I would agree. Like that would be really, really annoying. And I'm being like this for a reason. I'm sure you guys already know. I probably spoiled it in the thumbnail. It's people these days like lie about cancer that pissed me off, and also Elisabeth's. We'll get into that in a moment. And if you're at Elisabeth Sippin, like that's what. Then it went on in March 2018, like in the heat of the #MeToo movement. She wrote another piece in the Hollywood Reporter about alleged harassment that she endured years prior by a director she said was like on the set of another show, so not Grey's. And the behavior included misogynistic verbal abuse and unwanted touching, which we will get into in a little bit. Now, that same month, for somebody who always likes to be behind the scenes, is her 40th birthday, and she hosts this massive pajama party with about 100 people at this like big downtown LA event space. And people who were there, again, were like, it's a celebration. It's your 40th birthday. Again, the room, nobody in that room had a moment to not be reminded, as they were like anytime they were with her, that cancer was like the star of the show. So I guess like over her birthday cake, she like gives this like big, heartfelt, powerful speech and says, everybody in this room is somebody that I know and love, and over the very last bizarre 7 years has been instrumental in helping me get to 40. That's insane, right? Like 7 years with one of like what she said is like the most like deadliest rare aggressive forms of cancer. She also in this speech claims that 2 of her doctors from the Mayo Clinic had flown in from Minnesota just to attend this party, but that they didn't want to be identified, and she promised to keep them anonymous, but they were in the room, so like everyone's kind of like, oh my god, like where are they? But like they didn't want to be identified, so like no one's gonna like talk and be like, are you the doc, like to try to talk to him. She's giving, every time I think about her, she's like Kristen Wiig's character in SNL. I don't know what her name is. The one that's like, don't make me sing. Okay. And then like, that's what she reminds me of. Okay. So eventually on the show, Grey's Anatomy, Catherine Avery's, cancer plot, it plays itself out just like Elisabeth. Catherine goes on to live with cancer while maintaining this rock star successful career. But then another character became interesting to her, a troubled surgeon named Joe Wilson. I say it like I'm like, Joe. Haven't seen the show, but for everybody who I know, like, this is probably exciting for you. You're like, oh yeah, I know like where this is going. So with Joe, it kind of like started with an episode in season 15 that was called Silent All These Years. And I guess in this one, Joe, who's played by Camilla Luddington, she treats a woman who has been sexually assaulted, and it has this, I saw the scene in the documentary. It's like this very like powerful, emotional moment where they're like, it's this hallway hospital scene, like lined with women. It's like an army of awesome, like offering solidarity, just like, supporting her. Really, really like moving, powerful scene. So that's that patient. But then within this, there's this revelation from Joe. She's like seeing flashbacks, and then she meets her birth mother and learns this horrifying reality that she was the product of rape and the reason why her mother felt forced to give her up. This episode, I guess for fans, it even sounds like it just like learning about it and like seeing the clips was obviously like a very, very emotional, moving, touched and affected a lot of people, including like the staff on Grey's. And I guess with this one, Elisabeth Finch, she had decided to write this one completely on her own. Usually, like, even if you're like taking inspiration from yourself or others, hopefully with permission, you would still like be within that writer's room, like spitting off ideas. And I guess this one, she said that she wanted to just handle this on her own. And I believe that was something that we will learn later. Very, very calculated on her behalf. So when this episode aired, like I said, it affected a lot of people, and she spoke about it actually on a podcast. And this again was kind of like the height of this, the Me Too movement. And she talks about how she was inspired, somewhat from the current events, but that this was inspired by a really good friend of hers, like true story and like trauma that she went through. So having that piece of information that this again is somebody that this powerhouse also personally knows, and like this inspirational woman also knows another like extremely inspirational person in her life, like it made everything even more like kind of like impactful and heartfelt and more emotional. Okay, but this is where things get really complicated. After the assault storyline, Joe Wilson, her character, or the character of Joe Wilson, I guess you could say, she goes into like a very dark path in the show, spirals into a depression. It's been said by, other writers, colleagues of Elisabeth's, that this, really dark path that Joe needs to go on was, again, very heavily influenced by Elisabeth. So Elisabeth's like, I think her next journey here is just to have a complete breakdown and check into an inpatient psych facility. And so that's the direction that Joe's character went. And this is where life starts imitating art, because around the same time, Elisabeth Finch herself was struggling behind the scenes, and she wasn't just writing like this as like Joe's breakdown. She's saying like, I'm living through this. This is kind of like where I'm pulling this from. So she also had a complete breakdown and went into treatment for PTSD at a facility in Arizona called Sierra Tucson. And what's very interesting is when she checked into this facility, she did not use her own name. She went in and checked in under the name Joe, just like the character. So now we've got Elisabeth Finch in 2019 as this residential PTSD treatment center in Arizona as Joe. And I guess the other patients, like why would they? They didn't even like think about, they don't know that she's a writer or that hey, like this girl in Grey's Anatomy's name is Joe and is also going through this. So they just, like, they believe that this is Joe. During group therapy, quote unquote Joe bonded with a woman named Jennifer Byers, and they quickly formed a very, very tight and close friendship. And Jen's story is, I guess, harrowing, emotional. At this point, I wouldn't even, like, yes, it would be inspiring because, like, you're alive, but she was going through a lot. For 18 years, she had been married to this man named Brendan, a man who was a, like, master gaslighter and violent abuser. He controlled every move she made. Anybody that she, like, could, like, look or speak to, she almost daily was abused physically. And it got to the point where she was finally brave enough to get out of the situation and filed for divorce and, like, got herself to safety. And then Brendan retaliated, and because this guy is just, like, insane master, like I said, gaslighter and manipulator, he's able to paint her as an unstable one. So she, because of this, like, the stress, they had, I believe, 5 children, and he's trying to, like, keep them from her. She's worried for them. Not also, now she's out and, like, fearful of going back. It sounds like a very awful situation, and it obviously, like, triggered this. It was a dissociative PTSD episode. She was saying that she was, like, driving with her children, and she just kind of, like, briefly lost all awareness and was kind of, like, had pulled over and was, like, randomly, like, just, like, walking very disoriented and confused, which sounds absolutely freaking terrifying, but understandable given, like, everything that you've been through over the past 18 years. You got to think about that, like, 18 years, and, like, getting out of that and then being told, like, you're the crazy one and your children, people are trying to take your children, or he's trying to take your children away from you. Anyways, that was the situation, okay? So because she, like, had pulled over and walked away, it led to the Child Protective Services charging her with child abandonment, and basically ended up with her being given the ultimatum that there's something going on, like, we need you to get better, and if you are saying that, like, this was just, like, a temporary disassociation type thing, that's fine, but you need, like, some form of treatment, obviously, like, we need that verified by doctors, and we need you to go get some help. And it sounds like that was actually like hold on. I say it sounds like it was a really positive thing, but then she meets Joe. I guess, like, in hindsight, it sounds like that could have been, the right thing to do. It doesn't hurt to go and try to get to the root of all of that and make yourself even better and stronger. If your cup is empty, there is nothing left to pour into everybody else. You know what I mean? So she checks into the same treatment center as Elisabeth, aka Joe, and everybody who had met her there said that it was really, sad to see Jen, because it was so clear that she had been through so much in her life. She was very fearful. Like, she could not open up, didn't trust a lot of people. It was clear that she really, really loved her children, and she was just, like, basically, like, getting through each day, doing everything that she could to, like, see them again. But she was definitely standoffish. But by the time Elisabeth had gotten to the treatment center, Jen was already in treatment for about 6 months. And again, like, even though she had been there for 6 months, like, she was still described as, like, very, like, jumpy and fearful, unable to trust anybody. And she meets Joe and sees this other woman who is, like, this trauma survivor and so successful, and this amazing example of, like, what you could, like, still live through an accomplishment and accomplish in life, given, like, so many hurdles. Even though, Joe, aka Elisabeth, was there for a reason, she still was, like, a pillar of strength, I guess you could say, and, like, inspiration. And at least she was, like, getting the help, and that was going to make her even better getting out. She was also, like, from what Jen saw, pretty vulnerable. She saw, like, Joe, this successful woman, kind of experiencing or exhibiting the same reactions as she did. And a lot of PTSD survivors, the same kind of thing, like the jumpiness, the weariness, flashbacks and stuff like that. And Joe, had said that a lot of this attributed to the her losing her very close friend in the synagogue shooting and having to help, what she said, clean her friend's remains off the floor. So this really ultimately led into them becoming very, very close friends. And when therapists saw that for the first time in like 6 months, Jen was really making like strides of opening up to somebody and having trust, and it looked like both her and Joe were kind of like helping each other, they had, I guess, like bent some rules for them. They like allowed them to spend like not like all their time together, but as much time as possible, and also get their treatment, but also like room together and sit in on some of each other's sessions, because it like kind of like seemed like a comfort. So Elisabeth had even sat in on one of Jen's therapy sessions with her counselor. Jen's counselor, it'll become important in a moment. Her name is Carly, and Carly sounds like just like amazing, a badass. And she was treating Jen with EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Elisabeth would sit in on these sessions, or maybe one. Maybe she only sat in on one. I'm making things up. I'm so sorry, guys. I know that she sat in in at least one. She was very curious about it and fascinated by it. And it sounds like Jen was enjoying it and feeling like, okay, like this is actually something I can get on board with, and like seems to be like the most helpful thing that I've done thus far. This was something that I think Elisabeth insinuated that like maybe down the road could be something useful for her, because the funny thing was, or interesting, not funny, or you know what I mean, interesting thing, coincidental thing, there we go, Sherrilyn, is that a lot of the things that Jen would talk about in therapy and like group sessions or even one-on-one with Elisabeth like coincidentally would either immediately have like a similar story to, like they had so much in common, I think that was like part of the bond, or that, you know, later would like trigger her to remember like things that she had repressed. And one of those things was Jen talking about like, you know, being abused and by somebody that she loved and trusted. And then Joe reveals that she's like, oh my God, I too, like I experienced that too at a young age. And she alleged that her older brother, Eric, had brutally abused her when they were young. So this obviously makes them even closer. So then in treatment, we get to the family week. And this is where, you know, obviously it's family week. Like your family comes and then they sit on sessions and you're able to like talk about things. They're also able to like learn ways of supporting your healing. And this is where Jen, at least, learns that Joe is not Joe. Joe is Elisabeth. And she tells her, you know, okay, I've got a confession to make. My name is not Joe. I'm actually like a very big successful writer for Grey's Anatomy. And I only did this to protect like my privacy because, you know, like I work for like one of the biggest shows on television. That makes sense. I would have been like, oh yeah, okay, for sure. I don't think that she was like, also just so happens like the character that I'm writing about right now is Joe, also going through the same thing, but the explanation made sense, okay? So in therapy sessions, I think she also had the conversation with her parents too, actually, and was like, just so you know, like they call me Joe here, so just keep calling me Joe. So they knew about that, but the only person in treatment that knew that Joe wasn't Joe was Jen, and that her real name was Elisabeth. So during this family session, Elisabeth tells her family for the first time, or her parents for the first time, about this like repressed memory of her brother's supposed abuse. And I guess her parents were just like completely shocked. They were like, it made no sense. Even when they're asking questions, like when, how, what, like what era, nothing was really adding up, and they were very caught off guard. I can only imagine what this would actually be like for a parent, where you're seeing like, not saying that this like doesn't happen and like not to believe your child when they say this, or that like there would have never been signs, because that obviously could be the case. If you knew something was happening, obviously you do everything in your power to stop it, but like just to like try to process that and being like, oh my God, like how did we miss it? How did we not know? Another thing that was very interesting was that when the parents were there, not only does Jen find out that Joe is actually Elisabeth, she also finds out that she's got cancer, because up until this point she has said nothing. It was her parents being like, well, how are everything like going with that? Because we'll learn later, like she didn't want them around at all for treatment, even though they were like really wanting to be involved. So this was like the one opportunity for them to like talk about everything and being like, how is that fitting into the treatment? And then people are just like, what? You're currently fighting like an extremely rare and very aggressive bone cancer, and you have been for like 7 years. What the heck is going on, girl? So when everyone's looking at her, she's like, oh, yeah, no, it's true, but like I need to focus on other things right now. Like, please, I do not want to talk about it. So obviously, like Jen and other people that are close with her there, they respect that, and that was kind of just like how it was left. So at this point now, after like family week and stuff, and all of this kind of comes out, treatment's like wrapping up, and basically the best way to say it is like Jen and Elisabeth became extremely, extremely close. And even before Elisabeth had left or was leaving, she knew through Carly, like Jen's therapist, or maybe through Jen, that Carly had recommended that she get a service dog to help with her PTSD, like when it was going to be time to leave. She thought that was going to be very effective and positive for her moving forward. But Jen's like, oh, the cost is very, very expensive. I don't have a lot of money. Like, I've just left this horrible situation. I have 5 children. And so when Elisabeth found out about this, she stepped in and offered to pay for this dog, which Jen was obviously very emotional about, moved, very thankful for. And then in early July 2016, after Elisabeth had completed 6 months, they graduate and go into the real world. And, before they left, it was like, let's do everything that we can to stay close, stay friends, be each other's support system, in the real world. For Jen, this transition was not smooth. She said that after leaving treatment, she moved into a women's shelter while she was fighting for custody still for her children from Brendan, who was stalking her. So after she gets out, he is still continuing to stalk her and harass her, even posted photos near the shelter that she was at to like prove like, I know where you are. When she tells Elisabeth about this, because they are keeping in touch, Elisabeth's like, wanting to make her feel safe and kind of get her mind off everything. So she invites her to come and visit Elisabeth. Elisabeth invites Elisabeth invites Jen to come and visit her in California for a weekend getaway in Ojai. So they stayed on this beautiful property. It had like a pool, orange trees. It's this gated entryway that made Jen obviously feel even more safe for the first time in, I'm sure, forever. And this is a property that Elisabeth portrayed like she co-owned with actress Anna Paquin. Some of you might know her from like True Blood. I remember her from Fly Way Home. Who else? It was during this trip, I guess both women came to realize that they really not only just had like a tight bond and friendship and love for each other as friends, but also had like very strong romantic feelings for each other. Jen said that this was like the most like joy she had like really ever felt in her life, and finally this taste of like what happiness could be, because she had lived in this darkness and fear and abuse for so long. She felt like she was stepping into like this fairy tale, but most important, she said, she felt safe. So when she goes back to Kansas, she's head over heels in love with Elisabeth. It seems vice versa. They're staying in touch every day, mostly through text. They'd also like send each other little gifts in the mail. One of them was this like purple stuffed kidney, which ended up being like this playful little like nod to Elisabeth's kidney journey, because she also had this big kidney story. She had claimed that chemotherapy had wrecked her kidneys, and Anna Paquin, Fly Way Home, True Blood, whatever you will, she had actually given her Elisabeth like one of hers. Anna had given Elisabeth one of her kidneys. On top of feeling safe, Jen also felt, said that she felt very like trusting and connected to Elisabeth, because she said that Elisabeth was also like very vulnerable. It wasn't just her that was like needing to open up and drop walls. Elisabeth had also been like quite like reserved and standoffish. And one of the things that she would communicate with Jen often was like her fear of being lied to. She'd always say to Jen, like, please, please just promise me that you'll never lie to me. And she was like, absolutely not. So the relationship moves fast, and Elisabeth ultimately proposes to Jen in November 2019. This is just a few months after that California trip. Jen says yes, but the new engagement butterflies and bliss was short-lived. Kind of started with, it was 1 month into their engagement at a holiday party in Kansas. This was a party for Jen's son. It was a huge accomplishment. He was a dancer, and he landed a role in The Nutcracker, which I think is like, like if you know dancers, it's a big deal. It definitely deserved a party. So they were throwing this party for Jen's son, and during the party, Elisabeth all of a sudden not feeling well and complaining about like this excruciating pain like in the kidney area, and she's like, it might be kidney stones. So Jen is a nurse. I don't think I said that. Sorry guys, what the hell am I doing? Jen's a nurse. So she's like, her red flags are up. She's like, we need to get you to the hospital. Elisabeth's like, that's fine, I'll go. You stay here. And she's like, I'm absolutely not. Like, you only have one functioning kidney, like this, if this is a blockage or like a stone, this could be life threatening. Like, we'll deal with this later. My son's okay. He's got everybody else like, and would want me to be with you. Okay. But when they get to the ER, Jen gets a strange little surprise from the doctor. They found nothing wrong, first of all. No kidney stones. And then the doctor's like, yeah, I'm not really understanding because both kidneys appear perfectly healthy, which obviously made no sense given Elisabeth's story about her kidneys. And so she's confused and says to Elisabeth, she's like, both of them are absolutely fine. And Elisabeth, I guess, just kind of like brushes it off. And after they're discharged, she's like, oh, well, he probably just meant like that one working kidney looked really fine. They don't even care. Like, they didn't even care about the pain that I was in. Like, they just like brushed me off like nothing was wrong. So what are you going to do, right? Jen's just like, oh, yeah, okay, sounds good. And yeah, like she is in a lot of pain and maybe that is accurate. So she just kind of like pushed it to the back of her head. And she admits, and I've seen this so much. I've mentioned it so much also, is until you're like in certain situations, you really do not know how you're going to react. You think you do, but like that love and that care and that feeling of safety and trust and all of the above and seeing the big happily ever after, you do make excuses, right? And Jen's even said, like, when you love somebody, you do ignore the red flags. They could be just like whapping you like across the face, blaringly red in your face, and you'll ignore them. So still during their engagement era, that's already, got a little bit of questions, pushing them aside, planning to still go forward with the wedding. Jen herself faces something very traumatic. It's I guess like the final showdown with her ex-husband Brendan in September 2019. While Jen had been visiting Elisabeth in Los Angeles, Brendan took his life. And Jen, she's obviously devastated. Again, something that's probably very complicated to understand at that time, but it's like 18 years dealing with the abuse. She's almost like feeling guilt, right? Like it's like she's devastated because she's like feeling almost like thankful. It's like a relief that like this nightmare of looking over her shoulders and fighting for her safety and her children's safety is like done. So it's a very like surreal and traumatic thing to process, that you're like, it's over. And then you're like, oh my God, like I'm so thankful. But then also like at one point I loved this person as a father of my children. I'm trying to understand. I've never experienced that, but I can understand like why she was feeling so devastated about this. So as she's going through this, Elisabeth took time off work to go back in to Kansas to be with Jen and her 5 kids and just kind of like handle just the aftermath of everything. So what Jen didn't know at the time was that the story that Elisabeth told her Grey's Anatomy colleagues about this trip was that she said her brother Eric had attempted suicide. She alleged that he wasn't successful and that he was on life support, and that forced her to be the one to like rush out there and pull the plug on him. So she was like, this wasn't just like some sad twist of fate. She told people this was deliberate because Eric had left a note like blaming her for coming out about the abuse allegations, and he was a doctor, so he knew what to do to like not fully die. So then forcing her to be the one to like make that call and live with it for the rest of her life. So Jen didn't know she said that. And actually like 2 weeks after like Brennan's suicide, Finchy, yes, Elisabeth was still with Jen. She's updating the Grey's Anatomy staff, and this was one of the emails. I found this like so interesting and kind of like gives you a good idea of like her writing style and like their dramatics and being like, oh, you know, like back to the Kristen Wiig, right? Like, oh, don't make me. Hey all, I've been absent and coming back tomorrow. I just don't know who's looped into what, and I'd rather put it out there so no one is in the dark or feeling eggshelly. I've gone because my brother died by suicide. He was on life support for a short while, but ultimately did not survive. I say this not because I need or want anything from anyone. I'm not a delicate flower or whatever. I just want people to know I'm still here, still part of the team. I intend to just power through my episode shoot, but I recognized I needed to just take a bit of time away to process. Missed y'all, Finchy. So like I said, when she does come back, that's when everybody finds out like this horror, dramatic, emotional, traumatizing story that like he was a doctor. So like he knew exactly how to shoot himself without killing himself. And she had to be the one to pull the plug and just needed time to like process all of that. And her like writer colleagues, when they were talking about this, they were like, we bawled for her. Like we were crying so hard for her, couldn't even imagine going through something like this. From my understanding, like this was super dramatic and something I think like Grey's had already like done in a similar storyline. I think years before, I think it was like Meredith's mother like had attempted suicide or something like that. I don't know. I think I read that or it was on the doc. I have it written down somewhere for some reason. So none of Elisabeth's coworkers knew she was actually in Kansas helping her wife Jen cope with her ex-husband's death. Traumatic, like it's her wife's trauma. So when Elisabeth returns back from Kansas, back to LA, back to the writing room, she's got this like plethora of inspo. Shortly after leaving treatment, Elisabeth wrote a Grey's Anatomy episode called Breathe Again, and this ended up airing later in 2019. So this is when now the public is watching it. And to Jen's surprise, who is now her wife, so all of that stuff happened with Jen's husband in like September 2019. They get married in a private ceremony in January 2020 or February 2020. Come on, Sherrilyn, get with it. It was February 2020 on the beach in private ceremony in Palos Verde. So now Jen, Elisabeth's wife, is watching this episode Breathe Again and feeling like she's in the Twilight Zone, like looking in a mirror. It's like in flashback scenes. Now she sees like Joe, right? It's Joe Wilson. So she's like, yeah, Joe is in this psychiatric facility doing trauma therapy with her amazing counselor, Carly. Carly, same name as Jen's favorite therapist in treatment. And in one of the scenes, Joe says, like, I had a husband who beat me, but he is dead now. And Carly helps her with all of that through EDMR therapy. And it's the therapy that ended up, helping Joe find success in healing with Carly. Jen said nearly everything like in Joe's storyline at that point was like her life, and that she probably wouldn't have been as alarmed or like taken back if Elisabeth had told Jen like that she was the inspiration behind the episode, but that wasn't the case. Elisabeth even went on in other interviews to say that she herself used the EDMR to cope with her trauma. And Jen's like, she's knowing that's not the case. Like she had sat in and asked a lot of questions about it, but this was Jen, right? And so she's like watching her most painful, traumatic experiences like repurposed as this Grey's Anatomy plotline. And she said it was devastating to her because this is her wife, like the writer and that works for that show. She loved and trusted her and she felt exploited. Not even being acknowledged or having like a single conversation prior and asking permission, to have this be like Joe's art. One of Elisabeth's ex-friends described her perfectly in an interview. She said she's a trauma vampire and she feeds on others' tragedies for her own gain. And I feel like that couldn't be more accurate, because it wasn't only Jen's trauma of EDMR and her husband's death that she was feeding off of. Soon, everybody in Elisabeth's life learned how deep these lies ran, and like what was truly inspiring her in the writing room. So by late 2020, around a year into the marriage, Jen started noticing even more like inconsistencies in, the lies, or like the stories Elisabeth would tell, and they just kind of like started piling up. One thing was, she noticed that it seemed like anybody else, somebody was like in a crisis or getting attention, Elisabeth suddenly had this like flare up of cancer or a new tragedy that like took center stage and was like more important than anybody else's. Kind of goes back also to the celebration for Jen's son, and then that being the kidney fiasco, and then the questions from there. So, she's sensing something's off, and she does what any 21st century sleuth nowadays would do: goes to the internet, social media, and gets answers. You can find so much on somebody's social media. So she starts digging through Elisabeth's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram history, everything, looking for proof to connect a lot of the stories that Elisabeth told directly to her socials, like from that era or time, to like see like, okay, like what was that like on this day? All right. So the first bombshell she discovers is back in October 2018. This is where Elisabeth told everybody in her life that she had lost that friend in the Pittsburgh synagogue massacre. Remember, she took time off work to fly out to, be with other friends mourning. And then when she gets back, she tells everybody, like the FBI had allowed her to be the one to like wash the blood off of the floor of her friend. So that would have been on October 27th, 2018. What Jen found, though, was a post on that very date, and it showed something entirely different. It's a series of Elisabeth hanging out at a bar with friends in LA, laughing, very much not in Pittsburgh. And I can only imagine, I'm sure her heart is just like pounding. So she keeps digging. Next, she starts like looking through photos of Elisabeth during these supposed chemo treatments. She sees that Elisabeth is bald at one point, but notices she's got like eyebrows and eyelashes still. So she's like, okay. And then she sees what looks like this like a chemo port bandage on her chest. And to the average person, like the images were obviously like, could be convincing. Clearly they were to like Elisabeth's family and friends. She looked like she had cancer. Like you don't think anybody wouldn't. But Jen is a nurse, and she's looking, and she's like, if something doesn't look off, and reflecting, and she's like, she doesn't have she's what looks like a port here. But where that port would have been on Elisabeth's chest, there's no scar there where that like catheter would have been inserted. And she's looking closer at the photo, and she's like, this just kind of looks like a piece of dressing that she's like taped to herself. So then like probably the last thing she's thinking, she's like, oh my God, this broad, does she not have cancer, or never did have cancer? This is like the entire cornerstone of her identity. Obviously, this is all like earth-shattering for Jen. I cannot even imagine like what that would have felt like, especially given like what she had gone through in her life already, like finally allowing herself to like love again and open up, and even being the one like being like requested, and pulled on the emotional heartstrings of Elisabeth being like, don't, like promise me you'll never lie to me. And then like seeing this, she's just like heartbroken and furious. And obviously, she confronts Elisabeth. And for somebody who had been lying to the degree that Elisabeth had for like as many years as she had, it sounds like she folded pretty quickly. It could have just been like the fact that Jen was very like methodical in confronting her. She had like everything laid out. They had gone for like a drive. I think they were like just like pulled over in a parking lot or something like that. And she was like very matter of fact, like, this is what I have. Or maybe, Elisabeth was like just over lying for so long, and it was kind of like, all right, yeah, like got that off my chest. Maybe it's a little bit of both. Okay. Regardless, I wish I was a fly on the wall for that conversation. So Jen, yeah, she just says that like, yeah, one day they like go for a drive. They're sitting in the car, and she just straight up says like, you don't have cancer. And she says Elisabeth was like caught off guard, just kind of took a long pause and was like, I did have cancer. I just don't anymore. And Jen was like, you do not have cancer. You do not even have a port scar. Like here, you're showing that you had a port. Like you don't have a port scar. And basically just, with no leg to stand on at that point, Elisabeth just finally was like, yeah, you're right. So one lie down. Jen's just getting started though. Next, she's like, and I know you didn't clean up your friend's blood at the synagogue. You weren't even there. And I guess initially at this one, Elisabeth tried to push back because, yeah, how horrible. She was like, you know, like, I'm appalled, like, that you would even make such an accusation. Like, this is my friend. And then Jen shows her, like, the Facebook photo loop of her at a bar in LA with her friends. And she's like, did you even know anybody from that shooting? And she said no. She's like, no. Next, she was like, your brother's suicide, forcing you to pull the plug. Didn't happen. Elisabeth was like, no. And then I guess she was like, as she's like asking her these questions, Elisabeth just like, are you done yet? Jen said she showed no emotion, didn't apologize, didn't try to like explain anything. She was like, she explained her as almost like irritated and cold. You know, like she was just like, are we done here? Like, you got me. I can't even imagine. At the end of the day though, you know, like when everything came out, the lies went, it was basically everything. They were so deep. There was no property with Anna Paquin. Anna had never donated a kidney. Jen also found out that not only had her story been used for the show and exploited, but others in Elisabeth's life had too. One of them being, I think this is so sick. I mean, it's all so sick, but this is really forking sick. One of the inspirations behind that devastating, like, emotional story of Jo finding out that she was conceived during her mother's rape, that was a real story that another writer, another colleague of Elisabeth had confided, like personally confided in, like, to her with, when they were like sharing, you know, bonding over like trauma and stories like that. It was personal, not to be used as a storyline, because she's trusting her friend. And the reason Elisabeth writes this all solo is because, you know, like she's saying, I wanted to take proper care for the friend. Looking back, that seems so freaking calculated. It's like you didn't want to face this person or like your other colleagues, you know, with a story that this person confided in you and then you used as somebody else's story. That is, first of all, so ballsy, psychotic, sick. Like, people like this, I'm like, how do you sleep at night? How do you function? How do you look at yourself in the mirror? It's just insane. With all of this being said, Jen truly loved Elisabeth. And I think that's something that can be hard for a lot of people to understand when hearing these stories. You know, like when you truly love somebody, you think you know them, and you find something heartbreaking out about them, you're confused. Obviously, you're hurt, angry, yes. But that emotion, you don't just like turn that like intense love off, right? Like, I mean, if you could, there wouldn't be like heartbreak, right? Like, if so desperately, I'm sure like everybody watching has a situation where you're just like, I don't want to like love this person for whatever reason. It could be a breakup. It could just be, you know, like, yeah, feeling like hurt or deceived and wanting it to just end, and it doesn't work like that. So I do hope like in stories and situations like this, or, you know, like even in your personal life, you're able to like kind of like understand, even if it's not something that you think you would do. We don't ever really know, right? It always kind of like hurts my feelings to think about like some of the judgment I see sometime in the world and in the comment sections specifically, because we know that like oftentimes people whose stories like we are telling, they're, first of all, I'm always reminding everybody these are real stories, and those people involved in these stories often find the comment section and the videos that are made, and I'm telling you, like, the comfort and compassion goes so much further than just like being like, I don't fucking get this. Like, and it's like, I get it. I don't either, but I've also been in a situation like very, very similar and didn't ever think that I would be the person like that. Like, no, I used to be the person on the outside being like, girl, how? What? So I just want to kind of like remind everybody that. So it's like Jen could, like she could see the person she wanted Elisabeth to be, the one that she believed she was portraying and was, right? Like she wanted to save that person, save her marriage, and was willing to do couples therapy. I think they even went on it was like a retreat, I guess, like a week-long marriage intensive program to see if it could help. So one of Jen's conditions, it was very firm, and I agree with this, is, okay, if we're going to acknowledge this and I'm willing to get like past this, there can be no more lies, but you also have to like for yourself, like make this right, clear this up, and make a list of people that you need to tell the truth to. That kind of included, her parents and family, her closest friends, and some of her like higher ups at Grey's Anatomy. At the time, Elisabeth's like, okay, that makes sense. But then months were passing and Elisabeth's just kind of like putting it off. She'd like schedule a confession call with a friend and then just back out before. And Jen's like, I'm not going to let this go. We need to do this. You need to do this in order for us to move forward. So it did end up happening. I think it was around Yom Kippur, which is the Jewish Day of Atonement. Jen was like, this is probably like a really good time to do it. Elisabeth agreed, and I guess she like had reached out to a few people like in her inner circle, admitted to some of the lies. She admitted that there was no cancer, there was no friend who died in Pittsburgh, and no abortion during chemo. However, she did like still hold on to some of the stories. She insisted that her brother Eric had been abusive. So obviously not that he had committed, like said, like he didn't commit suicide, he's still alive. But had been like, well, I'm standing firm on the abuse. And this is something I believe like to this day she still hasn't retracted, which sounds like when her family found out about everything, they were like quite appalled by and still like being like, how do we believe you? Like everything else is a lie. How is this one thing the only thing that's not? It sounds like a lot of people in her life, like just to kind of put it very bluntly, found her confessions quite sickening. Like even when she's telling them like, yeah, this wasn't true, the majority of the feelings and the sentiment was that she was very disingenuous when people had like questions, which naturally you would. Can you imagine like hearing this about like one of your closest like friends or family members, and you're gonna have questions. When they ask them, she'd get super defensive and deflect. So it came down to Elisabeth not owning up to everybody. And that was the situation. That was the stipulation. Jen's like, I'm not going to be like in a room with somebody and being like, do they know or do they not know? Like we can't move forward with this not being a clean slate. So instead of taking accountability and Jen saying to like Elisabeth, like this, are you understanding, babe? Like not going to be able to move forward. Instead of just being like, you're right, and just like pulling off the Band-Aid, Elisabeth decided to file for divorce. And I think that that's a perfect example of a situation where actions speak louder than words. She showed exactly what she thought about making amends and accountability, which I guess, is probably the more admirable. Come on, Sherrilyn. I think that's right. Thing to do. As opposed to just like, it didn't sound like her words meant very much. She was just like, yeah, don't ask questions. This is what I have to say. And like, that's it. So the actions of just being like, you know what? I don't even want to lie anymore about like being sorry because I've lied for the past like how many years. So I'm just going to file for divorce because I want to do this anymore. And obviously at the end of the day, she did Jen a favor because who the heck wants to be associated with somebody like that? So after that, Jen can't sleep at night. She's like, I know the truth. I know that some people know like some of the truth, and I know that she's not told everybody. So I have no idea what she's going to spin, what she's going to lie, or like how further this is going to go, and like how many more people like she's going to affect in her life. Like firsthand, she's seen like the level of deception that Elisabeth has, and she does it to the people that are like closest to her. So she's like, I need to warn as many people as I possibly can. So she blows the whistle on all of these lies to Elisabeth's employers. She emails Shonda Rhimes directly. I love her. Like when I found that out, I'm like, I loved you. I loved you. I love you. So she's like, writes Shonda. She's like, you cannot let this broad like continue peddling people's stories, including mine. Like these are not her stories. And I know for damn sure, like this one specifically is mine. It's not her. So she didn't get an immediate answer from Shonda, which, hey, babe, it's fine. Like she's creating, like she's off on Bridgerton. She's doing so much these days. So Jen, amazing. She's like, I'm not done. She texted one of the Grey's Anatomy showrunner, Krista Vernhoff, and then sends the same thing. And so this time that worked. Within like a couple days, the HR department reaches out to Jen and let her know that there's like a full-blown investigation that's going to be launched. The investigation like very quickly confirmed everything that Jen had found out, and it led to all of the Grey's Anatomy colleagues like finding out, who obviously they were like stunned, furious. And then as the word is spreading of this deception, it turned into a 2-part bombshell Vanity Fair investigation piece written by Evgenia Peretz. I'm so sorry. I know I butchered that. But it was very good. It was so well written. I will have it linked. It was written in March 2022. It is so good though. I'm serious. It's so good. I'll have it linked. I just love especially writing pieces that just bring you in and you feel like you're there and going through it all. Then from there, it got greenlit for this multi-part limited series, Anatomy of Lies. Again, have to watch that. Now, prior to that, after the Vanity Fair article came out in October 2022, Elisabeth did finally break her silence. She had to do this in an interview. I guess she didn't have to, but she ended up doing this in an interview, which was probably the I guess the more effective way to just get it all out there and let people read it. And then not have to deal with people one-on-one and really take even it's a lesser step of accountability is what I'm trying to say. Anyway, she does an interview with the Ankler and she confessed to a lot of things. She, quote, said, "I know it's absolutely wrong what I did. I lied and there's no excuse for it." She did try to offer I guess an excuse. She said that it started to stem just from her experiencing trauma in her past, and that from that trauma, lying was her coping mechanism. And people are like, okay, but what's the trauma? Because you seem to have all of these lies of trauma, but where did that start? And that kind of goes at the beginning where people are trying to look back and see okay, where could this have gone? And it's very hard to understand, especially given how calculated and elaborate and long her lies were. She ultimately resigned from her position at Grey's, and from what I know, she's been very absent in the industry ever since. For Jennifer, understandably, this all took a very heavy toll on her. After Elisabeth left, Jen actually returned to the Arizona Treatment Center in March 2021 for more therapy and just trying to make sense of this betrayal. At her lowest, Jen even had considered taking her life, which I think is absolutely freaking heartbreaking. I'm so thankful she was able to pull herself out of that dark place and find her voice and protect others, because I can only imagine where this would have continued going. For her being strong enough to shine light and expose all of this, and it's very powerful too. I hope she's that was a lot to do to face and be brave enough to go out there and just expose this con. And doing that, she ultimately protected so many people falling victim to the same manipulation. And this is these types of cons are very interesting because it's not money. It kind of reminds me of There's No Ethan. We talked about that. There's a video on that. It's so good, because it's based off of the book by Anna Paquin, There Is No Ethan. If you haven't read it, it's so good. But it's the emotional manipulation and con that there's something about that where it's it's awful, but yet fascinating, because usually you hear about the money, right? You hear people just lying with no hesitation, no reservation, no empathy to get something from you. And this it's getting a piece of your vulnerability and your trust and your soul when it's not money. I guess you can almost try to explain the money a way of being I guess they needed it. There is no freaking excuse whatsoever. But that emotional, do you know what I mean? Am I making sense? I don't know. There's something more about that where it just feels more personal and hurtful and deceitful when it's just your emotion. And I don't know what it is about Elisabeths these days. I said that before. If you're an Elisabeth, and I'm sure you're lovely, but I'm we got this Elisabeth Finch, we've got Elizabeth Holmes, the Theranos con woman, and then TikTok's Elisabeth Teckenbrock. If you haven't been following, shameless plug here, I'm sorry, but what, my community tab or what Chelsea and I are posting, we are producing a limited series podcast on the Elisabeth Teckenbrock, and it is wild. Absolute one of the wildest stories that I've ever come across, and I'm not just saying it because I'm a part of it. We are working with real victims of hers, and it's just insane what this woman is still doing in real time. When I see posts of her to this day, and she's very aware of the project and clearly has seen some of the stuff, I'm the audacity of you to get online. The audacity. I'll also have that listed below. There's 2 episodes that are already live. There are much more to come. It gets like even crazier. But yeah, I don't know what about Elizabeth's. It's just, it's crazy. Now, like I said, I think it's important to mention that Elisabeth has never publicly retracted her allegations against her brother's abuse, nor has she retracted her allegations against one of the directors that she spoke about in that Hollywood Report piece. That was, it was a director that she alleged was on the set of Vampire Diaries, so not Grey's Anatomy. And again, she had wrote this at like the height of Me Too. According to that article written in 2018, she claimed that she was harassed by an unnamed director on the set of the Vampire Diaries. But with everything that came to light after the fact, like once she was exposed by Jen, there was now like an editor's note saying that the story was removed because her allegations had been disputed and found to be fabricated. So I don't think she's ever said that she had also lied about that, like her brother and the harassment and like sexual abuse or, you know, sexual assault from this director from the Vampire Diaries. But like that report is like, that's been taken out because it's fabricated. From what I've seen, Elisabeth's been pretty quiet these days. It doesn't look like she's involved in any like television writing or anything like that. I checked her like Instagram is private and I do not care to send a request to see what she's posting on there. So it sounds like she's just really kind of kept a low profile after all of this has been exposed, which I definitely, yeah, it's probably a good idea. We do know that she knows that there was like obviously a documentary and the Vanity Fair piece that was released. I think it was like the day the documentary was released. She wrote a statement on that on her Instagram and she just said like, I know nobody has a reason to believe anything that I say. I have devastated a lot of people in my life. I'm sorry. Kind of like, she's like, I got trapped in the addiction of the lies and the betrayal. And then in doing so, I traumatized the closest people in my life. And she said, I'm trying to make amends by just expressing, like how deeply sorry I am. And I understand that some people may never forgive me. She also added that she's been receiving mental health treatment for nearly 3 years. And if that is true, yes, that is definitely what needs to happen. So I would say, yes, we can still, support people in like getting better, but just like hopefully being serious about it. As for Jen, when I was checking in on her, I came across a GoFundMe. It's basically like a GoFundMe for a fresh start, as it seems like she is like still affected to this day, just like on the toll that Elisabeth took on her. So I'll have that linked as well. The GoFundMe write-up basically says, hi community, would you please consider supporting me and my family for an exciting, if not intimidating, new transition? I feel anxious about reaching out for help publicly. A surprising opportunity has come up and I would like to pursue it in Colorado. And the idea of having a supportive community is incredibly exciting. As many of you know, I had to sell our beautiful family home to navigate a difficult 3-year Hollywood divorce, and I continue to face ongoing legal fees that will last for some time. I've been working diligently and want nothing more than to have another home of our own that would truly be our home. I want to turn that dream into a reality for my kids and myself, creating new, safe memories together. I long to move away from a place filled with too many triggers and start fresh, as do the children. I'm hopeful for our future and eager to explore new opportunities, seeking a sense of safety instead of constant crisis. So I'm asking for help. I'm putting in a lot of effort to make this happen on my own, and while I believe I will find a way, I also recognize that I need to reach out for support. So I'll have that linked as well. Yeah, love you, Jen. Goodness, what a, This is why I've been in a spiral. I'm like, there is so much. Like, you just try to like process and think of everything and the lies, and I'm just like, I don't know. It's just something I'm so fascinated by, because I just like, I can't even like remotely understand. I'm also like a terrible liar. People know when I'm lying like instantly. I have like all of the signs. If I was in an interrogation room, I'd have all of them. I'd be like fishing. I'd be like looking to the side, just like dry heaving. So maybe that's where I don't understand. Plus I can't like remember or like articulate just like truths. So like, or just like reading from like my researched script, let alone keeping track of this amount of like lies and dates and times and stories. Like, oh my God, I don't even know what day it is right now. I truly don't even know. Like, I know it's May 2025. I don't even know the date. So, yeah, I don't know. Anyways, yeah. It's like, it's frustrating, right? Because you're like, you have a talent. She clearly had a talent for writing. And that could have just been it, babe. Just that. I have no idea. This is just my writing. But I guess maybe that actually, you know what? I think I just came with it. Because it's like, is it really that you can make it up? Or were you always just like taking other people's things? It's the trauma vampire, right? Yeah, that's where that came from. Oh my God. Okay, I gotta go. That's it for me. Yeah, if you want to fall into more Elisabeth Con rabbit holes, watch The Inventor, Out for Blood in Silicon Valley. That's the Elisabeth Holmes ones. Watch the Anatomy of Lies based on this Elisabeth. And then follow along mine and Chelsea's limited series called Elisabeth across all podcast platforms.
As if Scamanda and Inventing Anna popped out a child and you have Elisabeth.
When you first meet her, she's so nice.
She tells me she's like an ophthalmologist, owns multiple ophthalmology centers.
She had the son and a daughter.
Her ex-husband, who's the abuser.
At the time, we just believed this woman that she was this victim of domestic abuse.
Andrew is an amazing guy. I don't think that anything that Elisabeth had said about domestic violence fit the scope of Andrew.
I'm going to make a video telling the internet that you have not physically abused me.
She told me she wanted to start the nonprofit for domestic violence.
She's like, please invite your friends. We need to get donations.
So then, all of a sudden, once this nonprofit happened, she started getting her nails done, her hair done.
I just remember waking up one day and the Facebook page was gone.
When she said she had cancer, this took the family by complete and total shock.
She showed us made up proof of that.
Fake phone numbers, fake email addresses.
I really did think that she was dead.
She goes, I never had cancer. I faked having cancer.
She was victimizing herself on purpose to get sympathy by doing this crap.
She would sleep with men for money, and it was like, what the hell are you doing? She's just an all-around bad person.
Unable to be trusted.
This girl is evil.
All right, I will see you in the next video. I will miss you terribly. Until then, oh my God, answer to the riddle. Quick refresher. The more you tell me, the less they trust you. What am I? And the answer is a lie. Get it? Elisabeth. And it's for all of you. Well, not like you, if your name specifically, you listening now, your name's Elisabeth and you're not one of these Elisabeths that I was just talking about. Anyways, I'll see you in the next video. I'll miss you terribly. Until then, make sure to love each other, love yourself, and I will see you soon. Bye.